at the most basic level, forgiveness is on a continuum with grief. And the way I hold it now and understand it is that when you're offended or hurt or violated or whatever it is, the natural response is to grieve. And there needs to be, for almost everyone, some grief before forgiveness. That forgiveness is the resolution of grief. That there's an injury, there's a hurt, there's a something. And it's all based on loss. Whether we lose affection, or whether we lose a human being, or whether we lose a dream, it's all loss-based. And when we lose something, it seems very obvious to me that human beings have a natural reintegration process, which we call grief. And the stages of that are, not always followed and irregular and circular, but there's something to do with anger and sadness and, some denial and bargaining and all that other stuff. But the true resolution of grief is to forgive it, is to fully release one's sense of harm and victimhood from the experience. However, the problem is twofold. Some people never grieve, and some people grieve for 47 years. And they're both inadequate. They're both inadequate responses. They're both not deeply human. A deep human being feels pain. The deep human being suffers and allows oneself to suffer because that's part of this experience, as John Kabat-Zinn calls the full catastrophe. The deep human being also lets go of their suffering. Doesn't maintain it forever, doesn't create a personality structure around it, doesn't use it as a weapon. But without the grief, without acknowledging that I've been wounded and that something has been lost for me, you don't gain the benefit of the experience. You don't give yourself the possibility of the reintegration, which is I've been hurt and I've been mistreated and I may even have suffered a catastrophic loss, and I've healed. And so there's a power that comes from the experience rather than a clinging to the negative part of it so that you can have something to blame or hold accountable for your failures. Those are very different experiences. The first step of grief, at least from a forgiveness point of view, is to fully acknowledge the harm done, whether by you or somebody else, and to own the fact that there's a loss. That something that I would have wanted is not there, and it hurts. The second step of the grief process is to experience the feelings that are normally associated with the experience. So it's not enough to just walk in and say, hey, I was beaten for 12 years and, I want to get over it. And you ask them, well, how long you've been miserable about it? And they say never. Well, they're going to have to be miserable before they let it go. Because it's a full body, deep experience of suffering that when you forgive, you understand that there are other options besides continued suffering, but it doesn't mean you don't suffer. I've never met anybody who has had real loss that doesn't suffer at some level, unless, you use the manic solution, which is I just keep myself so busy and preoccupied that I'll never feel. But the second piece of grief is, have you felt some degree of the range of experiences? So have you been angry? Have you been unhappy? Have you been scared? Have you tried bargaining? Again, you don't have to spend months in them. But people will often, dissociate or suppress parts of themselves. And it's usually better to help them integrate those, feel it, before you ask them to let it go. Right? Because what you're letting go is the full-bodied response. You're not letting go of the event. That's immutable. But you can transform the response. And the last piece of the grieving that has to be there is, at least in my point of view, is it can't be a secret. I try not to let people forgive stuff that they haven't shared. Because there's such good research about resilience that people who go through harmful experiences and don't tell anybody have much worse consequences than people who tell people. The human connection is central to healing. Now, you reach a point in grief where forgiveness can facilitate it. But if, I've had people come into a workshop, I had one woman, and it almost broke my heart, because this was very early on in my experience, is she came in and she said, I need to forgive the fact that somebody murdered my son. And I remember this was at the complementary medicine clinic at Stanford, and I was still new, and I didn't know what to say. I hadn't done work with families of murder victims yet, and so I didn't know what to say. And then the only thing I could say was, well, when did it happen? And she said, a month ago. And I said, go home. This is not what you need now. Come back in 2 years. Come back when you've done the hard, the unimaginable work of grieving that loss, then forgive it.